Hello and welcome to CX Today. My name is Charlie, and today I am once again joined by prominent conversational AI thought leader and founder of Project Voice 2023, Bradley Metrock. Bradley, thank you very much for joining me. How are you doing today?
Charlie, I'm good. It's an honor to join you. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's great to talk to you, especially at this time of the year now. The conversational AI Magic Quadrant has come out from Gartner. And today we're going to be looking through that a little bit, evaluating some of the findings. But I think first things first, probably the most important question to ask you is, with conversational AI being such a crowded and complex space, what value do you think business leaders should put in these Gartner Magic Quadrant reports?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a mixed bag. There's a good bit of value, I think, and uh, I see a lot of buyer side people think in the fact that the Gartner Magic Quadrant provides a floor, and that's really the main function. It's a floor. It's the college degree of conversational AI. So what does that mean? That means that if you're deciding, am I going to hire this person who is a high school graduate, or if I'm going to hire this person who's a college graduate, you're probably all other things being equal, you're going to choose the college graduate. Now, you may not know that when that college graduate's degree says I'm a major in computer science, you don't really know what that means, do you? You don't know if they're great in computer science. You don't know if they did the bare minimum. You're missing a lot of information, but you got more than their competitor. And by the way, that's a defensible position for a lot of investors and buyer side individuals in their own boardroom, which is really critical. So if there's a problem, you can say, oh, well, you blame Gartner. They're a Gartner Magic Quadrant, participant. And so that becomes a defensible position for somebody with a career, with a company looking to hire one of these vendors. So, it's a floor function is what it serves at. Now, the limiting factor is that, as we've talked about many, many times, and I've written about it, it's a core tenet almost of the upcoming conference, and it's something that comes up with Project Voice Capital Partners all the time with new companies, is how do you actually compare one conversational AI company to another? It's very, very difficult. The technology is brand new, and it's changing with a velocity that, unlike we've almost ever seen, ChatGPT's arrival has only made it worse in the acceleration of the delta between different companies and what they provide. So, does Gartner's Magic Square give us a lot of help in truly determining which vendor is better than another, especially if two vendors are on there? Not at all. And is it better than your own judgment? Can a vendor deliver for you? If you feel that way yourself, you don't need Gartner's opinion on that. So,
Hmm.
bottom line, the Gartner Magic Square it serves a useful role. It tells you a company is often well capitalized because you have to be to participate in this. It tells you that they take their customers seriously because they recognize what this is. It's a floor function. But does it solve key problems for the industry? Absolutely not. Does it actually create some problems? Yes, it does. So in the end, a mixed bag.
Yeah, well, I think that's great. I think that's an important disclaimer actually before we go into going this, not to hold this as the be all and end all kind of thing. But as you said, it does hold some interesting insights. Let's kind of maybe break down some of those insights that are the most interesting. If we could just quickly put up on screen, sorry, the 2022 quadrant next to the 2023 quadrant. And I think, from my perspective, there are a couple of maybe more interesting takeaways here. First of all, I'll just point out that on the axis, both graphs kind of plot vendors against their completeness of vision and their ability to execute. And as you can see, there's a bit of change from the previous year, especially with Avamo have done really well to shoot across from niche player to market leader, and Google has also moved into the quadrant. There are also some new names, some names that may have come off. Yeah, so lots of change there actually. But Bradley, I don't know if you could maybe give me some of your top takeaways from it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting what is on the X and Y. Ability to execute, completeness of vision. These are bold proclamations, and there's some companies on the square that are definitely well positioned to execute. Don't get me wrong; it's a good list. Um, it's uh, it's thoughtfully done. Um, I do kind of wish that Gartner would be maybe out. Gartner does something that I think is self-defeating as well in the process, which is they only talk about this behind the closed doors of their conferences. They don't keep a very high public profile, which only serves to erode the confidence in it. So I think that there's some things that could possibly be different. But your takeaways, I mean, I think Avamo, if their movement is represented on this square, I think that matches reality because that's a good company. And it's interesting to see them, even in these abstract terms, these companies kind of relatively positioned. The whole thing is interesting, right? It's a talking point. That's one of the functions. In fact, it is the function is that it brings these companies top of mind. It's a marketing device, pure and simple, and it gets us talking. And with that, it's extremely effective. So I like the way it's constructed. I think it's clever. And so I don't have a big axe to grind. I just think it's good for some things and not good for others.
Yeah, yeah. So I think it's also interesting as well to see to think about the names that aren't on there too. In terms of, I mean, even if you look at last year's, there were Oracle was on there for some reason. That's kind of not there this year. Verint is another company, even though they've bought a conversational AI company, I think last year. And then Rasa, who's got a good reputation with the industry too, isn't in there. So I think that's yeah, I think it's definitely interesting to think about these fine elements kind of beyond the report. But in terms of those that are in the top right hand quadrant, I mean the likes of Core AI, who we were discussing before we came on to record, and Google and OneReach. There's quite a lot of names in there. Which are you particularly excited to see?
I mean, OneReach is a company that I've complimented a bunch,
Hmm.
publicly long before now, and I like the uniqueness of their approach. One of the things I gravitate to, just given the void and vacuum of meaningful comparative metrics that exist in this space at this time, one of the things I do gravitate to instead is content marketing. And few companies have done a better job with content marketing than OneReach, who has an entire book, Age of Invisible Machines. And they've really been out there effectively banging the gong, not just for themselves, but for the space as a whole. So I applaud that. And, I look at them and I see a lot of merit and virtue. And as you noted, it's a competitive space. And in fact, I'm in the process of writing something about this now, where the days of conversational AI CEOs, whether in big tech, Amazon, Google, all the way on down to venture-backed startups, all the way on down from there to bootstrap startups, um, the days of playing nice with all of your competitors are probably coming to an end, because the vast blue ocean there used to be is kind of getting taken up, and it's not so much a land grab now. It's a zero sum game, and so the time for companies to start acting like that is upon us. And this Magic Square has a role to play in that scenario for sure. So, yeah, there's things that we look at in how we put together the conversational AI industry landscape map, or how we evaluate who comes on the podcast, or what we do with the conference, or what companies we look at from the VC funding side, or any of the above. Um, And the Magic Square, it's a qualifier, but it doesn't go further. It's something you might see as a bullet point, but it's not something that's brought up, beyond that.
Mm. It's interesting actually. I think the one reach stuff was very interesting. I've seen their book too, and as you say, I mean, the map that we discussed last time, I mean, you had hundreds of vendors there, and I suppose this is only a look at 19 of those. So it's only a little look, but it makes me think actually, what would the change would you like to see within the Gartner Magic Quadrant maybe in 12 months' time? How do you expect maybe these names that are on there, how do you expect there to be any change?
Oh, I expect there to be tremendous change. Yeah, I mean, you look at how quickly OpenAI showed up, and with ChatGPT, that was like a meteor landing, that we didn't see until it was upon us. And just as quickly as ChatGPT got here, something else will get here that changes everything else. And Amazon and Google aren't going away. Samsung and Microsoft and big tech's voice has not really been fully articulated in this next chapter of conversational AI to come. And all these companies that are venture-backed startups that show up in a product like this Magic Square are going to be affected by what happens in the shifting of gravity as these bigger companies get their feet back under them again. We're going to see it's going to be a wild year, and there from an objective point of view, irrespective of who's paying Gartner what, and what that relationship is. You would expect absolutely for this Magic Square to be very, very different next year, and some companies, really at existential risk just because it's getting kind of crowded in here.
Yeah, it's interesting how much actually ChatGPT in itself has changed the space already. I saw Nuance came out last week with some new innovations for using ChatGPT, which will enable users, according to Nuance, to tackle more complex queries and things. And maybe they'll have a little bit of a foot up now because they're part of Microsoft and they've got a special relationship with OpenAI. So it's fascinating to consider how that might all change. Then we talk about kind of the quadrant as it is. Nuance isn't a vendor in there as well. So it's it's fascinating to think about all this. And I know a lot of the names that are in this quadrant will be at the event that you are hosting later this year, Project Voice. Could you maybe give us a little bit of an overview on why people interested in the Magic Quadrant might be interested in your event?
Oh yeah, it's a yin and yang. This Magic Quadrant is the most corporate of corporate representation on the space. It is um, it's as corporate as it gets. With Project Voice 2023, it's decidedly uncorporate. And while a lot of companies will be there for sure, a lot of value that's been derived in Project Voice, the event, over the years of its existence, dating back to 2016, is the willingness to speak the truth. And from things like having a contrarian speaker, we have somebody come in and give a keynote every year on why everything related to conversational AI is garbage. Whether it's the Federal Trade Commission coming in years ago saying that none of this is as secure as it needs to be, to the person coming in April talking about total lack of privacy and human dignity related to this technology. We feel it's important to always hear the other side, and it's why it makes this event so valuable. Is it's perfectly reasonable to get the perspective of the Magic Square, and as I said, there's value to that for sure. But it is only the beginning of the story, far from the end. And an event like Project Voice 2023 is really helpful as a complementary piece to that, to start to really find out how these players are viewed in the space and start to make investment decisions.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I know a lot of the names on the Gartner Magic Quadrant too will be attending the event as exhibitors. So if anybody has kind of seen a name they want to find out more, there's probably a good opportunity to go and find out more. And I'll also put a link to Project Voice for anybody watching into the description box if you'd like to register. And also I'll put a link to our rundown of the Gartner Magic Quadrant too, so you can take a deeper dive into it. But I think that's a really great place to end today's chat. Thank you very much for joining me today, Bradley.
Charlie, it's always a pleasure. Thanks to you and CX Today for all the work you do.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, and also thank you to everybody for watching. Bye for now.